Hello, yes, and welcome to this, the latest edition of the Baldwin Sports Media NFL podcast. A good morning, a good afternoon, or a good evening to you, however you may be listening and wherever you may be listening. I want to welcome you back to what is the first podcast where every team has played an NFL preseason game. So, whether or not you consider that to really be, I sort of had this discussion last week, or not you consider this to be truly back to football is totally up to you. I still say there's a little bit of time to go before we're back to proper football, back Sunday, competitive, full rosters, all starters starting and what have you. So we're not quite there yet, but if you want to get excited about preseason being back, then I'm not going to totally blame you for it. I am going to be touching on some of the preseason stuff in just a minute, but before I do, I need to do the admin for the show as I do at the start of every week. And that is by first off, thanking you for listening and tuning into us. If you're a new subscriber, welcome. Or a new listener, even welcome. But subscriptions always valued and appreciated. Don't forget you can like and subscribe on whatever podcast platform you are listening to this on. And if you are a returner, if you listened to a previous one and decide to stick around, then thank you very much for sticking around and putting up with my ramblings on a weekly basis and making me part of your work week. Don't forget that if you haven't already, you can follow us on social media. We are at Baldwin Sports Media on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube, and on Twitter, we are at MRB Sports Media. So that's where you can find us, as long as, on top of where you're listening to us now. And yep, that's the introduction. Let's go on with the actual preseason and the actual show. And as I sort of hinted, we're going to start off with the preseason because that is the main talking point. I'm not going to get too much into like individual players or plays because, as I've sort of spoken about in the past, you don't really want to be too down or too hyped about what you see in preseason. I gave the example that I foolishly put in, I believe it was 7 Pittsburgh Steelers into my fantasy football lineup last year off the back of their incredible preseason with the starters putting up 5 touchdowns on 5 drives. I learned my lesson, and all of a sudden, I'm just going to take a little bit of a step back when it comes to what happens in preseason. There have been some good performances. There's been far too many games, and I haven't been able to, obviously catch up with every single play of every single game to what have you. But certain snippets come across social media that you can latch onto. There have been some good things. Lewis Rees Zammit, for instance, of the Kansas City Chiefs, the Welshman that's making his transition over from rugby, looked to have a pretty good debut. He had a reception, a catch, a tackle on special teams, and he even took a kickoff for once in one of these dynamic kickoffs. So he's showing his usefulness, but again, not really against certified starters. So how can you really judge against that? Still learning curve, but I'm not going to say, oh look, he's an incredible all round player. He's going to be a star. I'm not going to be doing that. At the same time, Mac Jones, I believe the backup quarterback for the Jacksonville Jaguars, did not do very well. I saw a clip of him being flushed out of the pocket and being sacked, and some people slamming his performance. Justin Fields with the Pittsburgh Steelers, fumbling the ball twice. Obviously, still an issue with him. Maybe it's going to get worked out. I don't know, but it just I just want to repeat what I said the other day: is that do not get yourself too hyped and do not get yourself too down on what you are seeing in preseason. By all means, you can, there are certain things you can look at. Say if there's a wide receiver who has had a problem with catching balls in the past, and now his hands are getting better. Maybe he got the yips towards the end of last season. Now he's good. That you can maybe take as a positive, but don't take it as, oh, he's going to be an all pro, for instance. And at the same time, if there was a defensive end, I'm just going to just pick out random positions here, that didn't get a sack, that was very productive in college but didn't get a sack in his preseason game this weekend, don't immediately say, oh, he's going to be a bust. Again, give him some time just to get some rust off from not playing in such a long time and getting used to playing up to a certain level. So as I say, don't get too hyped, don't get too sad about what you see in preseason. But that's not to say that there haven't been some headlines coming from preseason. And the most notable one, as you might be expected, we're not going to talk about players and their performance, is going to be injuries, and they are starting to ramp up just that little bit when it comes to preseason. And I'm just going to use this website. I've got Sharp Football Analysis. This is to give you just a bit of a brief roundup of some of the names that have picked up various injuries in their their injury status. So Rondale Moore, Atlanta Falcons wide receiver, is suffered a torn ACL. He's expected to miss the entire season. Rashad Bateman of the Ravens is missing some time due to an undisclosed injury, but he'll be back to practice soon. Kyle Hamilton in the same sort of boat. Bills defensive tackle Ed Oliver cleared to return to their preseason game, but sat out due to precaution reasons. So you'd think maybe not that big. Let's just keep scrolling through. Will Anderson Jr. sat out the team's preseason for the Texans. Sat out the team's preseason opener due to an undisclosed soft tissue injury that is expected to be minor. Marquise Hollywood Brown of the Kansas City Chiefs suffered a a sternoclavicular. I know I butchered that. Joint dislocation and was hospitalized after the team's preseason opener in Jacksonville. Andy Reid said that it was the same injury suffered by Tyreek Hill in 2019 that led to them missing 4 weeks. So a little bit of hesitation there, or maybe a little bit of concern that he might not be back for the season opener. Puka Nacua considered week to week by the Rams. And let's just see. Jamal Adams hasn't been at times practice due to soreness, but is expected to return to the field sometime this week. So various injuries there with various levels of seriousness and potential worry to the teams. Again, the only real worry now, because the fact that it's the start of preseason, you've got the time to recover, but there were a couple of those, like Marquise Brown, as I said, the fact that he's now going to be touch and go for the season opener, which for the Kansas City Chiefs is against the Baltimore Ravens in the AFC Championship rematch game. What I will say is, I do still maintain that players should be playing somewhat in preseason. I gave my thoughts about Aaron Rodgers last week and the fact that he wasn't going to be playing in the preseason games and what that means for him and the team, potentially moving forward. So I totally understand that there are some risks involved, but I would rather these players still play at least a series, and just hope for the best. The injuries suffered could really have happened at any time. So I don't want to particularly put them on preseason games, especially when you are like Marquise Brown, working yourself into a new system, only signed with the Kansas City Chiefs this offseason. You are going to want to get some reps with the players during the in live situations, so you can get used to certain tendencies that you can only get in game situations rather than just working through practice. So I get that the players are going to be, I get the players playing, and I urge teams to do exactly that. However, I'm not going to be too foolish enough not to ignore the other voice that's in the back of my brain that's saying, no, this is exactly why you keep players out. Because there will be players like Marquise Brown, we'll use him as a prime example. That game in week 1 against the Baltimore Ravens has every bit of potential to decide what goes on in the playoffs at the end of the season. If we are expecting the Ravens to be the team that they were last season, which I think is not a far-fetched opinion to have, we're expecting the Kansas City Chiefs to be in pretty much the same boat. This could be an AFC Championship again rematch, if you want to put it that way. So one game, if the Ravens come in and steal a game, and it's because Marquise Brown is not there, and whoever the wide receiver that fills in for him doesn't have a good game, that you feel that Brown would have been able to overcome that, then if that's one game that means the AFC Championship game goes to Baltimore rather than Kansas City, for instance, it could end up having a little bit of impact further down the line. So again, I'm not going to be too stupid to say that this isn't the risk or this is why, but I would still rather in these situations have some game reps. Again, I'm not asking players to play every single down and every single snap of what is mostly meaningless preseason game, but I would always rather urge on the side of give them some reps rather than no reps. Again, give it a drive. If an injury happens, what can you do? Bad luck. It could have happened. Could have happened at any point in the season. So I'm still maintaining that they still should be practicing. Again, injuries are terrible, but But if you're a fan of one of the players that has been injured, or one of the teams of the players that has been injured, don't immediately look at this and think, oh, this is why we shouldn't be playing preseason games. There has been talk of increasing the amount of regular season games and maybe doing away with preseason like they do in college football, where you just go in week 1, that's it. two top 10 teams in an SEC team and a Big Ten team. No preseason, just go at it. And previous years past, one loss could have ended your season right away because of how the playoffs and the BCS systems used to work. So there is some talk, maybe, or there has been some suggestion of maybe going down that route. But I still think preseason games are necessary, and these are the risks that you just simply have to take. And of course, one way to mitigate risk is to keep protecting yourself from those injuries. And that brings us on to our next topic, which is the Guardian caps. And I've touched about this subject, I believe was last week, when I talked about how there are players are now, because they have the ability to wear the Guardian caps in games rather than just in practice, that they may not want to have the Guardian cap as is, as it were. Where it's just a big black. If you've ever seen rugby, like a scrum cap, but you've all seen the Guardian caps. Those big padded things. You can't really have them over the helmet because they're all sort of uniform color. There's just black. It ruins the helmet if if you're a Dallas Cowboys player, say. The fact that you're now not besmirching, but covering up the famed silver helmet with the star on the side, you're now covering that with just a black anonymous cap. May not be too appealing for you, or maybe visually appealing, or again, from a traditional side, you're covering up the helmet. So there are players now who are wearing, again, I discussed this last week, like a swimmer's swim cap over the Guardian cap, so that it looks a bit like a traditional helmet. And I've seen some back and forth over this on social media this weekend. Some people say, I know I get it in the name of safety, but this just looks weird. In a sense, I get it, but at the same time, would you not much rather have that than the uniform black scrum cap or grey scrum cap or whatever color you decide, or your team has? Would you not much rather that? Because then at least down on the if you're watching from TV or in the stadium, at least then they're not going to stick out like a sore thumb. From a distance, from the TV or in the stadium, it is going to look pretty much the same. And at the same time, if these players think that is going to be the way that they want to go and they want to be protected with, linemen don't want to be hit square on in the helmet at the line of scrimmage. They don't want to do that and they want to have their protection. Go for it. The studies have shown that it really decreases the amount of concussions the players get, and that is one of the main concerns of the NFL these days. So players are smart to it. They say, right, it doesn't really affect me. You might get some concern. I think I mentioned this for maybe wide receivers or speedy players. Maybe there is some argument that the wind resistance or the fact that it's just that little bit extra weight on the helmet might make it a little bit hard to turn around and see to catch the ball. Or I'm picking this last one off the top of my head. Would David Tyree have been able to make the helmet catch with a Guardian cap on? Would the material have worked, or would the ball have just slid off as opposed to being on the helmet? I don't know. There's all these concerns which I'm sure some people will see as legitimate, but other than that, it is going to be protective and it is going to be a beneficial thing for the game. Now, what I think is probably going to happen next is there is going to be some compromise or some combination of the two, where maybe it just becomes that the Guardian caps get put inside the helmet, and then the players just get all bigger helmets as a result. And then you may get the situation where everyone looks like Wes. I believe it was either Wes Welker or Julian Edelman or Danny Amendola. It was someone it was one of the expatriates that were moved elsewhere. So yeah, I believe it was Wes Welker when he went to the Broncos eventually. But yeah, he got made fun of on the internet for having a rather big helmet. But again, I reckon there is probably going to be some technological combination where the Guardian caps and the players' helmets are sort of merged in together so that we get back to a natural looking outer helmet, shall we say, but the players still get their protection from the inside from the Guardian cap. So but the fact that there are some players using them in game, I think it was always going to take that one player, and it's been a couple of players. It's not like there's one player who's out on their own in preseason. Now I've seen clips from a couple of games. But once we've got this first wave over the line, there might be that next group of people to say, okay, it's worked for them. It's not that bad. I'm going to give it a go. And then we sort of snowball its way through the league and we go from there. So kudos to those players who did take that. I'm not going to say it's a totally brave step because it is in the name of safety. I mean, if anything, going less safe would be a braver step. But at least I say on an aesthetic level, taking the brave step to say no, I'm going to wear the Guardian cap and I'm going to wear the cover on the top to make sure that it looks somewhat like my real helmet. Now, from on the field news, we move to off the field news, and the news that the Cleveland Browns, who for a while have been umming and ahhing about a new stadium or renovations to their stadium, have come out and announced some rather controversial plans. Now, they're controversial for two reasons. Both of them, in a way, financially based. The first one, and I'll go with the news that's sort of come out in the last 24, 48 hours to start off with. But basically, they want to move out of Cleveland and to the suburbs of Cleveland because at the moment they're right downtown by Lake Erie, but they are in the city centre, shall we say. And recently they submitted a proposal and revealed possible, artist renditions of a new stadium in Brook Park, Ohio, which is about 15 miles south of Cleveland, for what I'm reading. 2.4 billion, state of the art stadium. They're all very proud of it and whatever. The news that's come out in the past 24 to 48 hours is that officials of Brook Park, to be specifically Cuyahoga County, again, I'm sure I've mispronounced that, have said that they would rather not have the Browns in their basically in their back park, and they say they would much rather pay for a renovation of the current Cleveland Browns stadium, or First Energy Stadium, rather than have to bring the Cleveland Browns build a new stadium there. I'll just read this counter statement. It's from AP News. So basically, they're saying that it does not make fiscal sense. This is from Council President Pernell Jones Jr., saying any proposal would create an unacceptable risk to the county's general fund, and that cannot be considered. We believe it is our responsibility and in the best interest of our community to prioritize reinvestment in existing public assets. So basically, he's saying, don't come here, don't use our money to help build a new stadium. Use the money, go rebuild, go renovate the one you've already got. And that might end up being something that means that the Cleveland Browns avoid the second controversial issue, which was technically the first one because it came up first. But a lot of people, when they saw the renderings of the new stadium, all had the same thing, all had the same complaint. And that was the fact that they did not like the idea of the Cleveland Browns playing in a domed stadium. It's not necessarily a dome, but an indoor stadium, because that is what the renderings looked like. There were some weird people going on about it, mainly for, let's just say, historical or aesthetic reasons, because they were the ones saying, again, this is all off social media, so take it with a pinch of salt. Doesn't necessarily speak for every single person of a certain demographic, but it does give a lot of people a voice to say. They felt that it was basically untraditional and it's not right that the Cleveland Browns want to play outside and the AFC North football should not be played indoors. It was meant to be played outdoors. And I just find that funny. Again, as an AFC North fan, as a Pittsburgh Steeler, the fact that people are basically that desperate and clinging on to such a weird thing. Like, there are some things I can kind of get, that there are some traditions that should work with some teams. Again, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, in my mind, should always have a pirate ship in their stadium. I don't know what they're doing with Raymond James, if they have any plans to move or change or whatever, but they should always have a pirate ship. When you are, Los Angeles, there should always be a bit of glitz and glamour to the stadium because it's Hollywood. It's a little bit flashy, and that's what SoFi is. Fair enough. There, if you want to play to the Seattle Seahawks, I've always had very boisterous fans, so they build the stadium in a way to make the fans louder. They played to that tradition, so on and so forth. But for the fact that they want to hold on to the tradition and this notion that AFC North football can only be played outdoors, I do just find incredibly, incredibly weird. Now, I personally don't really have an issue with the Cleveland Browns moving indoors because for a financial basis and for the city of Cleveland, it makes a whole lot more sense because what does First Energy Stadium offer for the rest of the year? I know they just hosted WWE SummerSlam there in the outdoors, but you know those months from January to April, say, because it can still get a little bit cold, and if you're coming off Lake Erie, going to be even colder with the winds whipping off. Can you really hold many outdoor events there? I don't think you can. So for the city, it kind of makes some sense that you want to put it indoors, give it a dome, so that you can hold concerts, you can have whatever events you want to have there on a consistent basis, bring more money to the city. It all sort of works. And if it's the Browns that are in some way going to be paying for it, then yeah, let's make it happen. Now I get it's not. I'm going to backtrack slightly. I get it wouldn't be the city of Cleveland because it's 50 minutes outside, but where are most people really going to be going into when they come for these big concerts? If who's touring right now? Bon Jovi, for the sake of argument. Bon Jovi's playing in March that he wouldn't have been able to do before. People are going to more than likely fly into Cleveland Airport, stay downtown, do the business downtown, and get the money that way. Yes, they'll have to drive out for the actual concert, but most of the business will be done in the city. So it makes sense for a financial thing. And again, if the Browns are paying for it and they can get the money, then that just makes it better for them, and they can use that money to invest more in more in the team, more in the stadium, more for the fans, and give the fans a better experience or whatever, on game day and non game day. So this notion that it's somehow sacrilegious, that's the phrase I was looking for a while. It's somehow sacrilege that the Cleveland Browns want to play indoors rather than outdoors. I just think it's farcical. We're in the 21st century, guys. Money is what is driving most things these days. So you've got to you've got to follow the money. Would I like the Pittsburgh Steelers to have the option at least of a dome stadium, even if it's a retractable roof like Indianapolis and Arizona? And who else is a retractable roof these days? Atlanta is retractable. I think Lucas Oil is in Indianapolis. SoFi, no, I don't know if SoFi is, but there are stadiums up and down the country that have a retractable roof or see-through roof. Would I like that? Yes. I've been to Pittsburgh Steelers games during the winter. It's damn cold. I'd much rather that be indoors. Again, for the August September games, roof open, fine, go for it. When it snows, get the roof closed. It kind of makes sense. Just give the option. And again, that way you can keep the stadium in use and downtown and business booming for all year round rather than just half the year. So kudos to the Browns for it sounds as if they're going to have a little bit of a problem trying to make this work, but on the basis of it, indoor stadium, go for it. I don't mind because at least that way you'll be able to hear the Browns fans crying when the Steelers go and beat them there yet again. Right, and on to our final subject of the week. This is going to be somewhat football related. I know I've said I try to keep it away from football, but this is somewhat away from traditional football, shall we say. And this is the conversation because now that the 2024 Summer Olympics are over, well, the Paris ones are, now the attention focuses onto the 2028 Olympics. I mean, there is the Paralympics as well, but the way the sort of media goes on for it, the next games is in the next summer Olympics is in Los Angeles, and great closing ceremony. Tom Cruise jumping off the roof, brilliant. Not quite the same as Daniel Craig or the stunt people jumping out of a helicopter for the 2012 opening ceremony, but whatever, we'll give it to him. But the conversation has started to grow up again about whether or not flag football, well, not whether or not flag football will be in it, but who should be playing in it, because that is going to be making its introduction to the Olympics in 2028. And there's been a lot of talk about what team the US should put out, because there are a lot of players, NFL players, who want to play. They want to go to the Olympics. Now, there's going to be some back and forth over it. First off, whether or not the NFL and the teams are going to let the players go, because look at the timing that it's all taking place. This is going to be during peak OTA, minicamp, preseason time. They're going to have to take a couple of weeks away to be practicing for it. So that's going to be taking time away from the real football. So are the teams going to want to allow them to go? And then second, even if they do allow them, should they allow them? Because I don't know about you, but if I was an American flag football, a Team USA flag football player, and there is a Team USA flag football, just go and look it up. There's like world championships for this and everything, and they have a team of flag football players. Don't you think you would be just that little bit ticked off if you have put in all this work honing your specific craft? I get there will be some elements that are transferable from, you know, gridiron football, let's call it, to flag football, and maybe, maybe vice versa. But you've given your time at home to this specific craft, and then all of a sudden, Patrick Mahomes is going to come and say, "Nope, that's my ball now." Justin Jefferson, I believe, is a player who's I've been seen mentioned that wants to do a Tyreek Hill, wants to do it. There are a bunch of players that want to take part. But would you not feel just that rather bit ticked off if all of a sudden that's what's going to happen? I don't. It doesn't seem right with me. I can get the understanding, and I can understand where maybe the NFL is coming from, that they are growing flag football and they want to have you know it on the biggest stage and have the biggest names promoting it. And wouldn't it be great for marketing purposes along the line to have all these players playing flag football and give it the name recognition, and also for the USA to basically ensure that they win a gold medal on their home turf, on their home sport, because that would be somewhat humiliating if they were to lose to, France, say, just for the sake of argument. So to make sure that they win the gold. But for me, it just doesn't sit right with me. It just goes back to, what about the players who have played this game specifically to then go and have your spot just taken away from you? It just doesn't seem right to me. And that is going to be the debate that's going to be had, over the next couple of years. Is right, who is going to be taking part in this flag football game? Is it going to, how are they going to determine who goes? Because if every player wants to do it, there's going to have to be some qualifiers to it. Maybe they just give it to whoever is the winner of the flag football that they have at the Pro Bowl, at the Pro Bowl games every year. So maybe that's the deciding qualifier of who goes. Either way, it's gonna get a little bit messy from a whole bunch of angles. But I am interested to see exactly how the NFL and USA football and all the players handle that situation. Right, and that is it for this episode. I want to thank you once again for joining me. As I said at the top of the show, you can like, you can subscribe, and follow on whatever podcast platform you are listening to this to. Don't forget, you can also leave comments as well. So feel free to do that in the comment section, or reach out to us on social media. We are on Twitter at MRB Sports Media, and on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube, we are at Baldwin Sports Media. So feel free to give those ones a look as well. And until I speak to you guys next time, you guys all take care, and I hope you have a great second week of preseason.